Imagine this. Ace Frehley, the original spaceman of Kiss, standing before the cameras. His voice, steady but carrying the weight of decades of frustration. The room is silent. The world is watching. And then he speaks. The truth, raw and unfiltered. The truth about Gene Simmons, the man who built Kiss, and the man who nearly destroyed it. Gene Simmons, the demon, the fire-breathing icon, the face of one of the biggest rock bands in history. He wasn't just a musician. He was a machine, a businessman, a force that could bulldoze anything and anyone who stood in his way. His mind wasn't just on music. It was on power, on control, on making Kiss more than just a band. It had to be an empire. And in that empire, Simmons ruled alone. On stage, they were a unit, perfectly in sync, electrifying crowds with performances that felt larger than life. But off stage, it was a different story. A battlefield of egos, fights, power struggles. Frehley, a pure musician at heart, saw Kiss as something special, something built on passion. But Simmons, he saw dollar signs. He wanted to brand Kiss on everything. Lunchboxes, action figures, pinball machines, coffins. The money, the business, the empire. That was his obsession. Frehley started to feel it. The decisions being made behind closed doors. The contracts being signed without his input. The slow erasure of his influence in a band he helped create. The music, once their heart and soul, became secondary to marketing deals, product launches, and strategic expansions. He fought back. But against Simmons, that was a war you didn't win. The late-night arguments, the suffocating pressure to tour endlessly, to record non-stop, the demands to fall in line, to be a soldier in Simmons' army. Frehley was an artist, a free spirit, a rock and roll purist. But Simmons, he was a dictator. And then, the final betrayal. Simmons and Paul Stanley making critical decisions without him, controlling the band's direction, shifting the sound, reshaping the identity of Kiss into something Frehley no longer recognized. He wasn't just a member anymore. He was an outsider in his own creation. So he left. But Simmons' thirst for dominance, it didn't stop with Kiss. His battles extended far beyond the band. His ego, it clashed with some of the biggest names in rock history. Eddie Van Halen, a legend in his own right, a revolutionary guitarist. And yet, Simmons insisted he had shaped Van Halen's rise, that his guidance had played a role in their success. But the Van Halen brothers, they weren't having it. They saw it for what it was. Simmons rewriting history, positioning himself as the mastermind behind everything. And it didn't end there. He dismissed grunge as a temporary phase, mocked entire rock movements, belittled legendary bands like Aerosmith, claiming Kiss had done it first and done it better. His blunt arrogance and his hunger for credit made him a name that commanded respect, but rarely love. Because in Simmons' world, if you weren't helping him climb higher, you were irrelevant. And nowhere was that mindset more obvious than in his personal life. Simmons wasn't just married to fame. He was addicted to it. For years, he flaunted his conquests, wore them like trophies, bragged about them, celebrated them. He was the ultimate rock star. But Tweed, she was the one left picking up the pieces. Their relationship was a constant push and pull. Simmons, dodging tough conversations with humor. Tweed, smiling for the cameras but carrying the quiet weight of disappointment. The world saw them as the picture of rock royalty, but behind closed doors, it was a different story. And their children? They had it all. Wealth, privilege, a life of luxury. But Simmons? He was always chasing something bigger. His presence was felt, but his connection? Distant. The empire always came first. Even in the band, the people closest to him weren't spared. Even Paul Stanley, his so-called equal, struggled under the weight of Simmons' dominance. The power shifts, the constant battles over leadership, the branding decisions that turned Kiss into a marketing machine rather than a band. And yet, no one could stop him. Because in the end, Gene Simmons had built an empire, a legend, a legacy carved in fire and blood. But at what cost? Because while the name Kiss will never be forgotten, while Simmons' fortune will never run dry, the bridges he burned, the friendships he sacrificed, the people he left behind in the pursuit of power, Those are scars that no amount of fame can erase. A name etched in rock history, a man who reached the top, who conquered the world. But behind the wealth, behind the fame, behind the legacy, is a lesson. Because in the end, what is success if you have no one left to share it with?